There is no role as stressful as AD carry in teamfights. As the most important target on any team, your opponents are always desperately finding ways to engage on you. And in a game as bursty as League of Legends, it can often feel like a single mistake can cause you to die instantly with zero counterplay. But G2's AD carry Hans Sama takes that terrible weakness and flips it on its head. Even on marksmen, which are the most fragile role in the game, Hans is constantly playing on the brink of death to bait his opponents into terrible situations. In this skill-capped LoL Esports guide, you're going to see just how fearless of a player Hans Sama is and some of the crazy ways you can dominate teamfights by abusing the fact that you are playing the most sought-after target in the game. So let's get into it. What better way to kick things off than this game versus Mad Lions? To set things up, G2 is up around 4,000 gold and are looking to extend their lead. We're not going to lie to you here. As an AD carry in this position, you could definitely just kick back your feet and chill while your team sets up with vision and a good engage. You could easily win by just playing a safe front-to-back team fight and not stressing too hard. But Hans Sama seemed like he had dinner plans that day and is going to take matters into his own hands, ending this game in a matter of seconds. Now, the precursor to this fight is important because it will highlight why he plays the fight in a very specific way. G2 watches Lissandra clear the top lane wave and then disappear into the fog of war on the top side of the map. Then they spot Lee Sin, path through the Raptors towards mid, and don't see him again after that. And while they do have vision of Gragas farming bot, Rakan has yet to show on the map. Knowing all of this, Hans paths towards mid to contest the push. As he does, G2 pings their own Raptors. This indicates that they think the enemy Lee Sin is wrapping around them for a flank, since they haven't seen him on their left side wards in a while. So why does all this matter? Well, to put it simply, it makes it very likely that the Mad Lions are looking to turn things around with an engage from multiple different angles. They really want to punish Hans if he decides to get greedy and contest the mid push. A really easy play here for most AD carries is to wait for a teammate to clear Lee from the flank and contest for mid push afterwards. But that'd be too easy. Hans moves forward to push and decides he's going to bait this fight. He walks up and hits the wave. He then uses his blue trinket to try and find Rakan. Once he spots him in mid, he's got all the info he needs to begin the play. He moves up, pretending to mess up a bit, giving the go signal for the Mad Lions. As they engage, Hans kites diagonally away from Rakan and Xayah, making their engage pretty clunky. Even though he ends up getting CC'd, it's too far away from any other threat for it to matter. Of course, the threats aren't over yet. Lissandra is clawing over the wall to try and lock him down as well, but the second she comes over, he instantly flashes over the wall to safety. This is one of the most important teamfighting concepts you can ever learn as an AD carry. If you watch professional AD carries play, you'll see they very often start teamfights parallel to their tanks or even in front of them sometimes. There is a very good reason for this. As an ADC, if enemy engaged champions use their engage on you and you flash or dash backwards, it is usually a fight-winning play. This is due to the fact that the player is likely stuck in the middle of your entire team without any mobility to get out. This allows your team to easily and quickly focus fire them down. So, going back to the team fight, that's exactly what Hans did beautifully here. Both Rakan and Lissandra are out of mobility and are now stuck in the middle of the rest of the G2 squad. They are 100% dead, but Hans isn't out of trouble yet. There's a Lee Sin on his tail. Never mind, he just casually sidesteps his Q. This means there's 0 threats left, and everyone on the Mad Lions is out of position. Hans is free to start getting resets and taking over this fight. Due to his perfect baiting, the engage was extremely one-sided, so G2 wins and secures the Baron afterwards, which eventually leads to a game-winning push. Looking back at this fight, the key moments were baiting Rakan to waste his ultimate when no one was in range, and also getting Lissandra to overcommit. However, all of that could have been meaningless if Hans just died to Lee after flashing over the wall. Which brings us to this guide's special skill cap tip. We kind of quickly brushed past it, but dodging this Q was key to winning the fight. Otherwise, Lee would have instantly comboed and killed him. It may seem like Hans just has insane reaction speed, which to be fair, he does, but dodging his Q is actually a mind game that you can easily learn and apply in your own games too. This is very useful in high stress, chaotic situations where your opponents don't have much time to think. Basically, most team fights. You see, if you run in a straight line, your opponent will register that as you not noticing that they're there, or you forgetting about their important skill shot. You're trying to get them to think, oh, they've just forgotten about me and I can land my spell for free. Basically, you're guaranteeing that your opponent gets baited and throws their skill shot in a straight line towards you. That's what Hans did here. If he tried to juke regularly, Lee Sin would have just flash RQQ'd and instantly killed him. So instead, he just runs in a straight line away from Lee. Then he just waits for him to stand still, indicating that he's going to cast Q. The second Lee Sin does, he hard jukes to the right and easily dodges. If you're still not convinced that this works, you just need to keep watching Hans play. He constantly baits players' important spells out this way. You can see in this fight, he's running in a straight line, autoing versus Braum, who still has his ultimate up. It's easy to think that Hans just forgot about the spells still being up, but you'll notice the second that Braum turns around, that's when he begins juking and dodges the ult after baiting it out. And just like that, he dominates yet another team fight. You will notice this is a consistent theme in the way that Hans Sama approaches fights. Pretending to mess up is one of the best tools he utilizes to bait his opponents into throwing their lives away. This next Kog'Maw game is another great example of it. Leading up to the engage, it's very clear that G2 has vision of the Kennen that is over this wall. Hans has perfect vision of him, so of course he's aware that Kennen is there. As a team, they must also know that his flash is up and he's ready to engage. With vision of the Kennen, it's pretty easy to play around. All Hans would have to do is play this fight closer to the Baron wall. That way, he's still in range to DPS. And in the worst case that Kennen flashes over, he can just use his own flash as a response to easily get out. However, you will notice that throughout this entire engagement, Hans will actually willingly hug the wall beside Kennen. You're probably asking, why would he risk positioning just like this? Well, Hans is aware that Kennen is actually not that strong. He's got some items, but no big AP source like a death cap. Also, all of his teammates around him are basically tanks that can easily survive the ult. This might seem like a Kennen dream engage, but if Hans just flashes the engage, Kennen will just die for free. Now, watch this. He runs in a straight line towards Sejuani, just like we've discussed. Then the second she turns, he jukes back and lets his Renekton tanker ultimate. Kennen gets impatient, flashes over, and does literally nothing. With his flash, Hans is perfectly fine, and Kennen just dies for no reason. With 2 kills under their belt now, G2 is freely able to take the Baron to secure this win once again. Pretending to mess up and miss position is a great way of baiting someone on the enemy team to throw their life away, but it's also a great tool for setting up your own teammates as well. One of the best ways to use yourself as bait is to set up your other allies to flank. Everyone knows that a flank engage in this game is almost a guaranteed win. Pancering the enemy carries and getting your engaged champions right on top of them is generally just game winning when it happens. That's why this next engage will go to show how fearless Hans is and his extreme determination to set up his teammates. Right now, G2 is pretty split on the map, whereas 4 members of Koi are around mid or close by in the river. What happens next will seem very odd with this in mind. Mickey flashes forward to Nautilus ult the Ashe, and Hans follows aggressively behind him. This initially makes zero sense, as they are immediately at a numbers disadvantage. But G2's goal is clear. They want to bait Koi into walking towards mid. This creates a teleport angle onto the ward behind them, while also giving time for Caps to eventually flank as well. And they have all the faith in the world that Mickey and Hans can bait this cleanly and buy time for the rest of them to get there. So Hans paths directly towards the Ashe, pretending like he's getting baited, and is going to fully engage on her. Koi probably saw this and thought it's their opportunity to strike. So instead of just headbutting Hans away, Alistar is going to try to go for the kill with a WQ. This is a sign that they actually think they're in a winning position and can turn this engage around. But the second that Alistar begins his combo animation, Hans had his Q at the ready and just hopped diagonally away from all the threats. This puts Mickey directly between him and the Sejuani that is likely in this brush, while also putting him at max distance between him and Tristana. Needless to say, it's another flawless bait. Alistar is engaged way too deep at this point and is left to die. Meanwhile, the other members of Koi are in full retreat. Unfortunately for them, they had overstayed at this point. Caps and Yike join up to the fight and are able to continue the engage. They pick up another kill and are now in position to secure a game-winning Baron. And this was once again all on the backs of Mickey and Hans working together to flawlessly bait their opponents into a losing fight. Now, moving on to our final example, to truly appreciate what you're about to watch, we have to break down a concept known as tethering. If you don't know what tethering is, don't worry. Technically, it's pretty simple. Basically, it's the act of moving back and forth with your opponent while staying just outside of their range. There's generally 2 points to this. 1, you're trying to bait them to waste important spells as you walk in and out of their effective range, or 2, you bait them to slightly misstep into a positional disadvantage. For example, they walk into range of your auto attack, letting you hit them for free. Now that you understand that, let's get into our next team fight. To set the stage, G2 is trying to siege this tier 2 tower with Baron buff at the moment. Unfortunately, Caps missteps and takes a huge chunk of damage before the fight has even started. There should really be no point in continuing to fight here, especially because G2 isn't even in a commanding lead this game. Fighting a carry down is not a great idea, but Hans sees his teammate's Maokai ult coming and knows he can use the chaos to bait someone out of position. Keep in mind that when SK sees this ultimate coming, they basically have 2 choices. As a team, they can choose to disengage and all fall back together to tank it away from Kog'Maw's auto range, or they can all move forward and use their health and numbers advantage to just force G2 away. However, coordinating like that during the chaos of a fight is pretty hard, and Hans takes advantage of it perfectly. Take a look at his spacing as the ult comes in. He walks forward, and the enemy Lulu takes this as a sign to turn. With Polymorph, they can focus Kog'Maw down. Aphelios realizes her intention and turns as well, but by then, Hans and Lulu have already turned and backed off. He turns around again, baiting Lulu a final time, but then he just goes back again to spacing them out. Lulu then realizes she's just being baited over and over and gives up on trying to polymorph Kog. However, Aphelios didn't get the memo and keeps walking forward despite having Braum passive still on him. This is a fatal mistake. Now watch this fight in real-time speed and you'll understand why that was so frustrating to deal with for SK. There's a Maokai ultimate coming their way, panic is ensuing, and all the while Hans is just spacing them back and forth, baiting forcing someone to mess up their positioning. This all happened nearly instantly, and decisions had to be made in fractions of a second. Unfortunately for Aphelios, he fell for Hansama's bait and was quickly disposed of. The bait ensures G2 an easy teamfight win, which eventually leads to cracking the base open and taking an inhibitor. We hope it's now painfully clear what you should be looking out for when watching G2's games from now on. AD carry is a super tense role where a single mistake could cost your team the game, but in spite of that, Hans is constantly using himself as bait to lure his opponents into losing positions to ensure G2 consistently comes out ahead in teamfights. That's it for now, and thanks for watching.